Hello and good afternoon. It is it's just the afternoon, just past 12 on the 12th of July 2023, and I'm just going to pour myself a cup of tea. You might want to pour yourself something a little bit stronger because we're about to dip into the quagmire of SHIT, that is Deputy Prime Minister's questions, because the Prime Minister is hiding again, possibly in a fridge somewhere. Who knows? Anyway, let's go. Let's go over to Parliament and see what's happening.
We come to questions to the Deputy Prime Minister. I call Stephen Bonner on a closed question.
Question number one, Mr. Speaker.
Question number one.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
Will the Prime Minister list his official engagements?
I have been asked to reply. Global oil prices have remained largely stable this year. This has not changed following the announcement of additional production cuts by Saudi Arabia and Russia. We expect the impact of the cuts will be mitigated by the increase in supply from other producers and a decrease in global oil demand, as we have seen previously.
Stephen Bonner.
Really
Speaker, if we want to insulate ourselves from future price rises, then we need to invest in a greener future. The United States gets it. They've committed $370 billion on net zero energies. The EU, they get it. They're set to match that figure. And in Scotland, we get it. We have the ambition to lead the world on renewable energy. We have the energy, but we do not have the power. So why is Westminster trying to block Scotland's path to a safer, greener future?
Where is it?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we of course will continue to invest in renewables, but I would say to the party opposite, we should also invest in our energy independence, and that means investing in the North Sea.
Why have you banned?
If we fail to invest in the North Sea,
fossil fuels.
we'll be more reliant on foreign producers, and we will have higher carbon emissions as we import from
How are you going to
elsewhere.
reduce carbon emissions if we dig up more carbon out the ground?
Deputy
Get rid
Prime
of your
Minister.
ban on onshore wind farms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is in Vilnius attending the NATO summit. This summit is an opportunity to build on the work we have done over the past year, strengthening NATO and supporting Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, in addition to my meetings in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
McKinley.
Mr. Speaker, New Labour's old mantra used to be education, education, education. Its new one seems to be tax education, tax education, tax education. Does the Deputy Prime Minister share
Tax private schools because they suck out so much of our funding and our brightest and best from our society.
being sent into the state sector with the cost to the taxpayer? I have
Well,
a number of
there's
English
going to be no
language
tax.
schools in my
It's going to be
constituency,
cheaper.
and they
Shut
are
up,
concerned
shut
that
up,
this
shut
will
up,
apply
shut
to-
up, you irredeemable bastard. Sorry, I'm not supposed to swear. He's talking absolute crap. Don't believe these lies. He's saying that it's going to cost us money, taxpayers, to have private school kids going into public education, going into state education. That is not true. It's simply not true. The reason why it's not true is because they have tiny little classes that are tax exempt. Those companies that own these schools don't pay any VAT. They are supposed to be charity, so they avoid paying tax by giving just 1%. Okay, so 1 in every 100 children who go to these schools is on a full bursary. They're the ones that the parents can't afford to actually pay for the kids' education. 99% of them, they're being funded, mostly or in part by the parents. And the vast majority of the tax that these places avoid, that goes on things like skiing trips for the children of billionaires, ski equipment, shooting ranges, rowing equipment, musical instruments. In state schools, we can't even get musical education anymore without it absolutely costing a fortune. It used to be free. This is why a lot of musicians in this next generation coming up with musicians are rich kids. Nepo babies, almost, sometimes. But this guy is an outright liar, and I just had to stop the video there and just point that out because this is one of the arguments that really messes with people's minds. but it's a lie. And you've got to understand that it is a lie. Also, do you know what would really help? Do you know what would really help at the local comp here in Durham? Do you know what would really help? Having a millionaire on the board of governors or in the PTA. Just saying.
Them as well as tuition, out-of-hours tuition, and sports training additionally. Does the Deputy Prime Minister object to these measures as strongly as I do?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes, well, once again, we have seen from the Labour Party them putting the politics of envy above the interests of children in this country. And as my honourable friend rightly highlights, recent analysis shows this could lead to over 40,000 pupils leaving the schools they're in, placing further burdens on existing schools.
No, stop lying. He's lying. It will actually save us money. It will save us money and increase social mobility off the charts, because it would also mean that we'd have competent people in charge of things like companies and also our governance in this country, which would also save us money.
And costing £300 million.
Now
300 million. Oh, well, if it's going to cost 300 million and they avoid, 2 billion in tax a year, then I think that's a net gain of 1.7 billion. And that's net gain.
Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yay.
And I know you're a keen historian, so I looked up the last time a Prime Minister missed 2 sessions in a row with other engagements, which was March 1996. And I'm very proud to be filling the boots of Lord John Prescott, but I think it's safe to say he's no Heseltine, Mr. Speaker. Why is it, John Prescott asked, that in Tory Britain, tens of thousands of families are facing repossession, negative equity and homelessness? And can he tell us, 27 years later, why I'm having to ask the same question?
Well, because the Tories have been in charge for 13
Clearly the right honourable
years.
lady did not listen to my
Hi,
previous
Richard.
comments.
I'll try and
the
make
Prime
it
Minister
as amusing as
is
possible.
at NATO. Of course, that
Amazing.
wouldn't
You
be a
could have
problem
moved
if she'd had
PMQs.
her way. Her old boss wanted to abandon Ukraine, abolish the army,
Have our boss.
and
Oh,
withdraw
okay.
from
He's
NATO.
talking about
He certainly
Corbyn.
wouldn't be going
He's
to
talking
any
about
summit,
Corbyn,
Mr. Speaker.
who hasn't been the Labour Party leader for over 3 years.
And
But let's talk about Corbyn, shall we?
And when it comes to house building, I will take no lectures from the party opposite on home ownership. My parents would not have been able to buy their own home if it were not for Margaret Thatcher and the reforms introduced by her government. And this government is building on those with record house building.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, I think he's taking lessons from the former Prime Minister on telling the facts. The last Labour government worked hard to dramatically reduce the number of children in temporary accommodation. But under the Tories, the number of homeless children has risen by 75%. I'm proud of our record on tackling child poverty. Does the right honourable gentleman feel ashamed of his?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'll tell you what this government has done. We've lifted 400,000 children out of child poverty. We have introduced the national living wage, something the party opposite totally failed to do, and increased
they brought in the minimum wage in the first place
the
that your
national
lot
living wage
complained
by the
about
largest
and voted
amount
against.
ever, meaning £1,800 for working people, and cutting their taxes by
made
doubling
our
the
energy
personal
bills go
allowance.
up to
That is the
£1,800.
surest way to ensure we lift people out of poverty, and would never
not.
have happened with the party opposite.
The Labour would be
Mr.
worse.
Speaker, it's like the ghost of Prime Minister past is still here. And I tell the right honourable gentleman that he should be careful about the stats he used, because the Children's Commissioner warned the other Prime Minister about peddling false narrative on child poverty around those figures. The truth is, Rising bills and soaring mortgages and plummeting real wages are pushing more and more families to the brink. Those already struggling are being hit hardest by the Tory mortgage bombshell and rising food costs.
£500
So
for
can you
over
tell us
1 million
how
people.
many
£500
primary
is gonna
school
rise.
children have been pushed into poverty since his government took power?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I would say to the Right Honourable Lady, it is
What would you say?
this party, not
say
the
it, you
party
know.
opposite, which extended free school meals to all 5, 6
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
7-year-olds.
You
Something
extended
the
school,
party
free school
opposite
meals and then you said
failed
that you
to
didn't
do.
want it
And
until you were
sits
embarrassed by a
alongside
footballer.
many measures we are taking to help people with the cost of living. We are paying half of families' energy bills last winter, funded by our 75% windfall tax, freezing fuel duty, helping families with childcare, and delivering on our pledge to reduce the
You
debt.
said delivering. Quick,
it may
take
come
a
as a
drink.
surprise to the Right Honourable Lady,
How
but
do we do this
balancing the
each week?
books means more than working out how many more millions to take from her union paymasters.
Your paymasters are Russian
Mr. Speaker,
gangsters
once again,
who
he
have
talks
invaded
about balancing
Ukraine.
the books. His party crashed the economy, and he seems to be completely oblivious to what it's like for working people in this country
He is,
at the
he
moment.
is, they all are.
New research out today shows that 400,000 more primary school-aged children are growing up in poverty since his government came to office. Why does he think that is?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I will take absolutely no lectures whatsoever.
lectures. I'll take
from
no
the
lectures,
party
take a drink.
opposite about how
Take a
we
drink.
help
I'll take
children
no
in the
lectures.
most need. It is record
what?
investment from this
Homeless
government
people
in
with children.
education. £2
Homeless
billion
people with
pounds more
children.
this year,
Mate.
£2 billion
Listen.
next year, which is giving
You're putting
those
money in,
very
but
children
it's not
the
enough.
best possible
What happened
start
to
in
the
life,
2 point, what happened to
ensuring
the 1.9
that we have the
billion
highest
that we had
reading
for levelling up
standards
that you've
in the
you failed to
Western
spend on
world.
anything?
And I have to say to the Honourable Lady, listen, her leader says he hates tree huggers.
filled in
They seem
Corbyn
very keen on
delivering,
hugging
I
that
take no
magic
lectures.
money tree.
Oh, the magic money tree that doesn't exist, except it does. When Theresa May decides it does, or Liz Truss.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't even acknowledge it, let alone explain why child poverty is
issue for
rising.
Tory
What
donors.
hope has he got of solving it? So let me try a simpler question for him. How many kids don't have a permanent address today compared to when Labour left office in 2010?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Go on, answer the question.
We can exchange all these numbers across the dispatch.
BBC?
These-
BBC are putting up these lies that he's saying.
Mr. Speaker, these are the numbers that matter. There are 1.7 million
Oh, okay, you're not gonna answer the
fewer
question
people in absolute poverty under this government. 400,000 fewer children,
Nope. You've already been told that
200,000
that's a
fewer
lie.
pensioners, and
That's a
1
lie.
million fewer people of working age, because the single best route out of poverty is a job, and record numbers of people, 4 million more people under this government have got a job.
I'll
That
put
is
up
the
a link
difference
to,
between
Teespring
this
under the
party and the
description
party
of the video
opposite,
at the end.
who always
Invite
leave
from
office
Teespring.
with unemployment higher.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, what matters is what people feel every single day at the moment, who are going to work and can't afford their mortgage, can't afford their rent and can't afford their bills because of this Conservative government.
Yeah, that's right.
There are
right, you know.
55,000 more children without a permanent address today compared to when they took office 13 years ago.
55,000 children.
We've gone from a Labour cabinet focused on tackling child poverty to Tory ministers who won't even admit the problem. Just like the Question Time in March 1996, they can only offer excuses and not answers. Lord John Prescott said to Lord Michael Heseltine that day, "How can the right honourable gentleman be so complacent in the face of sheer misery created by his government's policies? 27 years on, why are we asking the exact same thing?"
Yeah, because the Tories always do the same thing. Always destroy life for normal working people. Ordinary working people.
A little bit more if we carry on. Come on, Deputy
Well,
Prime.
Mr.
Penny Morton's got a
Speaker,
face like thunder.
I know
look.
there's a reshuffle coming up on the other side, but this audition for John Prescott's old job is just getting a little bit hackneyed. It is
Audition for
this
John Prescott's
government
old job. She's
that
already
has
the
lifted
deputy leader of Labour.
400,000 children out of poverty. The party opposite, I hear the right lady, claiming to be the party of working people, but under their policies, people can't even get to work. They
What?
support Just
Eh?
Stop Oil protesters,
Can't even
blocking
get
our
to
roads.
work.
They
No, they
support
don't.
their union
No, they said they don't
paymasters,
support that.
stopping our
Your
trains,
paymasters are Russian gangsters.
and
Someone
of
stand up in
course,
Parliament
they
and say,
support the
your
hated
paymasters
ULEZ
are Russian
stopping
gangsters.
cars
Someone say
across
it.
our
Come on.
capital.
Say it.
While
God
Conservatives
damn it.
get Britain moving, Labour are standing
Don't.
in everyone's
What are you talking
way.
about? Our trains are absolutely FUCK'd. Our waterways are filled with sewage. Everyone's on strike.
Given the Mansion House Compact does not encourage our pension funds to invest specifically in British companies, what more can the government do to encourage greater investment in our companies, especially the climate technology startups, which are increasingly going abroad to find the funding they require to the benefit of our competitors?
Deputy Prime
Went to
Minister.
Queen's College.
Well, I
in
think my honourable
Taunton.
friend raises a very important
Private
point about
independent
both
school
start-up
and
capital and
Doesn't sound
ensuring
privately
that we get
educated,
more
does it?
money to high-growth companies. I would say that the Chancellor's Pension Compact is a very important step forward and will unlock £75 billion of additional investment. I'm quite confident large amounts of that will go to UK companies, and that sits alongside measures such as the Edinburgh reforms to financial services, again, which will help improve financial services in this country and unlock money for those industries.
SNP Deputy Leader Murray Black.
Hey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the Deputy Prime Minister dismissed warnings from these benches that mortgage rates were nearly back to where they were after the disastrous mini-budget. This week, mortgage rates have surpassed those levels. How high do they need to go until he and his government takes it seriously?
Yes.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady knows, people around the world know,
don't do that.
the
It's a really good
driver of higher mortgage rates is higher inflation. And
is your
higher
fault.
inflation is caused
It's
by
your fault.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the
Oh, piss off.
post-COVID supply chains.
Oh, piss off. Why have we got higher inflation in other countries then? Post-COVID supply chains. Yeah. Those supply chains were damaged by COVID. Now, somehow, no, they were damaged by Brexit. They continue to be damaged by Brexit. That's what the supply chain problem is. Because if you're making a crop, say, not even in the EU, if you're making a crop in, say, Morocco or something, if you have the choice, you're going to sell it to the EU first and foremost, and then you'll sell the leftovers to the UK. And that's why a lot of our stuff that we're eating these days goes off about 1 day or 2 days after you buy the stuff.
But what we have to do
That's a supply
is
issue.
make sure
do you
we
have to do?
halve
Get out of
inflation. It's only by getting inflation under
how's that
control
going? How's that
we will
working
be
out?
able to get mortgage rates down, and that
Halve
requires
inflation.
discipline.
Let's get inflation down to
Discipline on
1%, mate.
spending, discipline on public sector pay, and discipline on
Discipline
energy
on
supply,
spending.
all of which is
These are the Cowboys who gave millions, billions to their old school chums, people like Dido Harding and that horrific Michelle Mone woman. Gave them all this money for PPE and for a track and trace system that didn't work. Millions and millions of pounds. The bounce back loans. They have written off billions of pounds of our money that they gave to gangsters. The bounce back loan was supposed to be set up so that it was only companies that had been in business for, a couple of years before the pandemic. No, people made a business in the morning on Company's House, and in the afternoon they asked HSBC for 50 grand, and they were given 50 grand. They went, thank you very much, closed down the business, and walked off with 50 grand. And thousands of people did that. Thousands of people under this disciplined, fiscally responsible government. Bullshit.
lacking from that
bullshit.
party.
Murray Black.
Bank of England predict that mortgage payments will rise by at least £500 for 1 million households. The Prime Minister says that people need to hold their nerve. The Chancellor said just last night that mortgage holders should just shop around. Speaking of his own party, the member for South West Devon said, if the circus doesn't stop by Christmas, it's over. Does the Deputy Prime Minister understand that people can't afford to wait until Christmas and that they need help right now?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the fundamental thing we have to do is to halve inflation. That is an approach that the IMF, quote, strongly endorses, because higher inflation drives higher mortgage rates.
This. So they turned up to the IMF and they said, we want to half inflation. And the IMF said, yeah, that would help get the interest rates down. That's it. That's all that's happened. It's conversation. They've done nothing to actually stop inflation. They've done absolutely nothing. In fact, they've done everything in their power to make it go up even more or stay at a high level. Because, if we have 11% inflation and it goes down to 9%, they can say we've reduced inflation. But you haven't. It's still going up 9%. It's just not going up as fast. It's still inflating. The bath is still filling with water, just not as quickly. But it's still a disaster. £500 extra every month on 1 million people's mortgages by this time in a couple of years. Thanks to these people in government.
But that's not all we are doing. With the mortgage charter, signed up by 90% of mortgage providers, we are giving people help to extend their terms, to go interest only, and to reduce their monthly payments.
Banks do this anyway. Banks do this anyway. Banks have been doing this for years. In fact, this was under Labour that these rules came in to stop banks from basically taking people's homes from them because they missed one payment and giving them holidays and opportunities to have a time when they just paid the interest. They did not bring that in. They did not bring that. That's been around for years. And he's quoting stuff that Labour,
is supported by Martin Lewis, a real money-saving expert, unlike the big spenders on those benches.
Stevenson.
Last year I visited Abbeyfield House in Wentzfield and I was impressed by this model of assisted living for older people that gave them the independence of a self-contained flat but the ability to eat and socialise together. I was deeply concerned to hear that a consultation is underway to close the Abbeyfield House in Wentzfield, and I went back to speak to older people. They unanimously want to stay there. Abbeyfield is a charity. His Majesty the King has been patron for 40 years now. It cannot meet the cost of updating the estate to meet environmental standards. Will my right honourable friends meet with me to see what support government can offer to Abbeyfield so that my residents don't have to leave the homes they love?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance. I would note that we have provided £7.5 billion of additional funding for social care and discharge, and specifically on energy. We have got an energy advice service to support smaller businesses, and we'll be piloting new audit and grant schemes which may also help.
Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In January, Emily booked an appointment with her local dentist in Chard, Somerset, for the 14th of June. Only to be told by a neighbour at the end of May that the surgery had closed in April. Emily no longer has a dentist. All the remaining surgeries aren't taking on any new patients. Emily doesn't know what to do. So can the Deputy Prime Minister tell Emily and millions of people like her when can they get an appointment with a local NHS dentist?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, the right honourable gentleman may have missed, but our NHS workforce plan is investing an extra £2.4 billion into training and retaining crucial NHS staff, including dentists and GPs. And actually, the number of dentists will rise by 40%. And I would say to people across that constituency that the best way they can ensure better services for their NHS is to vote for Faye Purbrick, the Conservative candidate.
Charles.
Mr. Speaker, could the Deputy Prime Minister let us know when we can expect allocations from the Levelling Up Fund round 3? And when it comes, will it be true to the Prime Minister's pledge that all parts of the country will benefit, including the South East and most particularly the very deserving town of Andover?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, as well as being an excellent minister, I know how committed my right honourable friend is to the town of Andover. We will shortly be announcing the new approach to the third round, and further details of this approach will follow shortly.
We've got some ideas of how we could spend 1.9 billion.
Mr. Speaker, there's some things you encounter in political life that's certain to horrify, appall, or sicken you. But I don't think I've ever seen anything quite so grotesque as the painting over of Mickey Mouse on a children's mural as was done by the Home Office in a detention centre in Kent. Now, no minister so far has roused the necessary compassion or concern to speak out about this. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister to look into the deeper recesses of his soul and just simply condemn it?
The Tories, mate, they don't have any souls.
I'll tell the honourable gentleman what real compassion looks like. And that means stopping the vile people smuggling trade.
What's that got to do with the kids? No, this is kids. Nothing to do. Nothing to do with the people smugglers. These people are already here. These children are already here. Don't be talking about people smugglers because you, not you watching this, but him, their party basically makes that happen. We had no boat people before 2018. They engineered this situation so that people died, children died, people suffered, and they got the vote from the racists who they were worried about going over to UKIP or the Brexit Party or something like that. No, we need that racist vote. We need that horrible, nasty, racist vote. And him trying to defend this. Look at him. Look at him trying to defend this. This is
government is taking action to deal with it. With
action
Stop the Boat
taking
bill, and that
taking
party
action to deal with cartoons.
Shameful. 18 times
Shameful.
last night voted against it.
What? Didn't answer the question.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On these benches, we know, as the party of aspiration, the importance of ownership.
Party of aspiration, did you hear that? Whatever, Bim.
It now takes an average of 8 years for the average first-time buyer to save for a deposit. And in parts of London and the South East, it can be longer than that. What is the Deputy Prime Minister and the government doing in order to improve the prospects for younger people who want to own their own homes?
Prime Minister.
Well, I know what a passionate champion of this issue my honourable friend is. It is actually the case that almost 850,000 households have been helped purchase a home since 2010. And actually in 2021, the number of people getting onto the property...
Just having a look at Bim's school. The fee per term for year 3 and 4. Year 5 and 6. The fee for the year... Sorry, no, per term, and there's 3 terms a year, is £18,173. So that's about £18,000 a year for him to go to Bishopsgate School, which is the school that Bim went to.
Ladder for the first time was at a 20-year high, thanks to initiatives such as First Homes and the Help to Buy scheme. Of course, that stands in contrast to the party opposite, who oversaw the lowest...
One angry pagan, I know you're angry, but can you stop filling up the chat with just emojis because it means I can't read anyone else's messages? Thank you. And please, everyone, don't swear. I know I nearly swear and sometimes swear a little bit. I'm trying really hard not to. We are having huge problems, Phil and I, on this channel with YouTube demonetizing us, and we don't want to give them any excuse. So we've got to be a little bit careful on that because obviously I can't stop things coming up on the screen instantly.
This level of house building since the 1920s.
Catherine Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With rising ticket prices, many of my constituents find they can get the best value fare by going to the staff ticket office at Lancaster Station. It's perhaps why so many of them have signed my petition to save staffing at Lancaster Station. So can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, is the closure of ticket offices just yet another cost of living bombshell hitting my hard-working constituents?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, it is important that the railways continue.
Sorry, just going back onto that. Yeah, he did subsequently, after going to Bishopsgate School, he did actually attend Eton. As someone's just pointed out in the chat, it's £80,000 a year for Eton. And the Tories are like, but think about the cost. Think about the cost of having these private school kids going to a state school and having their parents invested in state education. I mean, imagine the cost of that. Yeah. What was it they said about the cynics? They They know the price of everything and the value of nothing.
Continue to reform after the record amount of money that we gave them during COVID. I would gently say to the honourable lady that if she's concerned about her constituents getting anywhere on the railways, she should condemn the totally unjustified strikes which close them down week after week.
Unjustified. They're not unjustified, mate. You have given the railways to your Tory mates and shareholders in other countries, and other countries nationalised rail services like SNCF and Deutsche Bahn that own vast swathes of our public transport infrastructure and are making a massive profit out of it. And we're subsidising rail transport and bus transport in France, in Germany, in the Netherlands, through our public services, which should be for the public, not for private enterprise. That was their system. They set it up. They nationalised. They privatised the railways. They basically denationalised the buses. Deregulated. They deregulated the buses.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 4 summers ago, the unprecedented climate change-driven heat wave caused irreparable damage to Chelmsford's flyover. And since then, people from all across Essex have been stuck in Chelmsford, traffic jams, wasting time, hitting our economic growth. We badly need a new junction at the Army and Navy, but the funding decision has been stuck in Whitehall. So will my right honourable friend use his powerful cross-cabinet convening powers to get Treasury and Transport to agree to the money so we can deliver a new junction, stop the traffic jams and get Chelmsford moving again?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I know how powerfully my right honourable friend makes the case for this scheme, and she has done so once again in the Chamber. The Chancellor was sitting next to me and would also have heard the case. I understand that the outline business case submitted by Essex County Council is being considered by ministers right now, and all relevant ministers will have heard her injunction.
Scottish Ambulance Service statistics showed an increase in hypothermic call-outs of over 30% across Scotland last winter, and a staggering 84% in the north in December. Whilst fuel calls have fallen slightly, food and other costs have risen exponentially. To end the perversity of energy-rich Scotland seeing 1/3 of Scots in fuel poverty and literally freezing, when will the government bring in a social tariff to ensure that the poor and vulnerable can get through this winter without calling out the ambulance service because they're freezing?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, as my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, set out in the autumn statement, we are exploring the best approach to consumer protection from April 2024 as part of wider retail market reforms. I would just reiterate to the honourable gentleman that this winter we paid half of energy bills in Scotland. That was thanks to the strength of our union.
I wouldn't shed a tear. It's a beautiful building.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I remind the Deputy Prime Minister and the House that yesterday was National Remembering Srebrenica Day? But may I particularly point out a little-known fact? The British soldiers took out about 2,000 civilians in April 1993 from Srebrenica. Those British soldiers were B Squadron, the 9th 12th Lancers, not widely known, but those 2,000 people from B Squadron were actually under my command, and they saved a huge number of lives by taking them out. And they, too, should be remembered for their very gallant actions, because it was very dangerous.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I pay tribute to my right honourable and gallant friend and to all of those who he commanded in the 1990s. We must honour the memory of those killed and pay tribute to the extraordinary courage shown by their families, by survivors and all those members of our armed forces who served so gallantly in that situation.
In the Welsh Affairs Committee, my honourable friend for Ceredigion asked the Chief Secretary to the Treasury about the varying comparability factors for Wales, for Crossrail, for Thameslink and for HS2. His answer began with, "You are dragging me into quite complex technical details." And then he gave no complex technical details. I'm sure that the people of Wales would be delighted to tackle any complex technical details were the Deputy Prime Minister to explain to the House why we are paying £5 billion for a white elephant in HS2, which by now comes nowhere near our country.
Prime Minister.
So this is the joke about HS2 being an England and Wales project. It's not even like a fully English project. It doesn't go anywhere near Wales. It's not going to go anywhere near the north of the country. And I've talked about HS2 a few times on my channel, and I won't sort of interrupt Prime Minister's questions too much about it. But if it is about capacity, bring back the old railways, bring back the old lines, because they're there. You're not going to have to cut through any ancient forests. Yes, you might have to demolish a couple of supermarkets and maybe a few flyovers and possibly one or two housing estates. Yes, you will. You have to compulsory purchase them, but you won't be going through any ancient forests. And you can put the slow trains on those tracks and free up the West Coast and the East Coast and the West Coast main line. Two trains going 125 miles an hour that can leave every 15 minutes.
Well, it is thanks to the strength of our United Kingdom that record sums are going to Wales under the Barnett consequentials. Indeed, in the spring budget, we increased devolved administration funding by £630 million. That included £180 million for the Welsh Government. So we're ensuring resources are going to Wales so they can enhance their transport infrastructure.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If it wasn't so serious, it would be comical. However, in Horning on the Norfolk Broads, I have a whole area totally cut off from having a mobile signal, wait for it, until August, because of nesting seagulls taking up residency in the new telephone.
Could you believe it? Seagulls!
Let's say a family holidaying on the Norfolk Broads gets into distress this summer.
Yeah.
They will not be able to make an emergency call, which could be life-threatening. Would the Deputy Prime Minister please help me call on Natural England to be sensible and make sure that for public safety reasons we can get a mobile phone mast working in a prime holiday location?
Well, we all love the diversity of wildlife in this country, and particularly on the North Norfolk coast that he represents, but I think he makes a very strong point about the balance between that and ensuring people have access to modern communication facilities, and I shall certainly take it up with Natural England.
John Speller.
Day in, day out, the public and businesses are hit by endless chaos and confusion across government departments. For them, clearly, Britain isn't working. Yeah. Now, if I can paraphrase the Deputy Prime Minister earlier, we know there's a reshuffle coming up on their side. So, can you tell us, is this...
The Seagull guy, he actually went to Gresham's, a private school in Holt, in Norfolk, I think. I'm just putting out there that every Tory MP pretty much has spoken today went to private school, and they started today by going, well, we can't have people not going to private school because that would cost the taxpayer a lot of money. Do you know what would be really good for this country? Social mobility. Do you think you're going to get social mobility with this lot in charge? No, never. Never going to happen.
And incompetence in the civil service, or is it rather that so many of their ministers are just not up to the job?
I'm going to stop yelling into the microphone because I'm upsetting Bruce.
Well, I
tell you
think
what,
you can
tell
see
the Tories to stop being
from the record of this government, whether it's cutting NHS waiting lists, whether it is record funding for our schools and hospitals, we have an excellent team.
Did you hear that, peeps? He just said he was cutting NHS waiting lists, which are the longest they've ever been in the history of the NHS. They're cutting them. They are. That's what he just said that in the House of Commons. Can you correct the record, please?
We'll continue to serve.
Paul Holmes.
Do I support private schools? No, they should be abolished.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week we all celebrated the 75th anniversary of the NHS. You may not be aware, but it's also the 75th anniversary of Newton Aycliffe, a new town in my constituency, designed by William Beveridge. Could I ask the Prime Minister to ask his honourable friend, the Prime Minister, to come and visit me as his constituency neighbour and celebrate these 75 years and indeed the 60 years of the community newspaper.
Do you mind if I don't?
Provided by the Howard family.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well,
I'm afraid I can't speak to the Prime Minister's diary, although I will make representations. I would be delighted to visit his constituency if he wishes me to attend instead.
Unfortunately, Nick and Diff's comment hasn't come up on the screen because it probably used the word morons and Twitter, YouTube didn't like it. But I'm going to read it out. This is from Nick and Diff. Some of these characters belong in an episode of Yes Minister. Utter parodies, posh pigs in suits, toffs, patronising well-to-dos, disgustingly out of touch morons. I hate them with a passion. Share your passion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The day I had to phone my bank and tell them that I was having difficulty paying my mortgage was one that has lived with me for years. What I found was that because my income was so low at the time, ironically, I was not eligible to switch to interest only or get any help. I never want my constituents to feel the terror and abandonment that I felt that day. Can he understand that? Because his complete lack of empathy in his responses to the deputy leader of this group suggests not. I do welcome the temporary measures, but they are temporary. This is a mortgage crisis that's been 2 years in the making. Does the Prime Minister and himself really think they're going to fix it in 12 months?
Prime Minister.
Well, of course, it's deeply, deeply disturbing, upsetting and worrying for anyone to contemplate losing their home. That is exactly why my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, has introduced the Mortgage Charter, now signed up by 90% of the mortgage market, which will provide support for people. In addition to that, I would say that after 3 months, people on universal credit can also apply.
I didn't think that moron would be censored either. It's just, I don't know. There's two modes, isn't there? There's top chat and there's live chat. So what's coming up on here is top chat, and what YouTube does, it automatically filters out messages that you might not want to see. I've tried to have both up on my screen so I can see messages that aren't coming up on the actual screen itself. But it's just one of those things, isn't it? You can write something very similar and it'll come up. As long as you don't swear, generally, it usually cuts out swear words. Although it didn't before when David swore, and I was like, hang on, let's just come up on the screen. I was just expecting it to come up on the just the live feed.
Apply for further support.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Highest Bateman
government survey has shown that 75% of British businesses support improving the UK's sick pay system. And yesterday, my right honourable friend, the member for South Swindon, launched a report alongside WY Economics and the Centre for Progressive Change with ideas on how that could be done. So will my honourable friend...
Privately educated, by the way, just put every single one of them. But yeah, Jonathan Gullis. You wouldn't think of it to look at him because he does look like a howler monkey, but he did actually go to a private school.
Make sure that we get a meeting with the Chancellor to see what ideas can be put ahead of the autumn budget. We should also have an economic boost of £4 billion to the UK economy.
Bloody hell, I couldn't even remember his question. It was only 10 seconds long. Howler monkeys, don't approach them if you're ever in Central America and you see howler monkeys up in the tree. Never approach them, even though they might be far up. Because if you go close to them, they will wee on you or literally poo in their hands and throw it at you. Jonathan Gullis, presumably.
The Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend, as ever, has made a very strong case.
Honourable.
The Chancellor is sitting next to me, and I'm quite sure he would be delighted to meet with him.
Dan Carden.
Privately educated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The forced isolation of people in care homes and hospitals from their loved ones since the beginning of the pandemic and its terrible consequences, as well as the many who died alone, has left a profound trauma. We've learned the hard way that the care of a loved one is not an optional extra, it's a central part of dignified care. My Care Supporters Bill would guarantee this fundamental right. And while the government recognises there's a problem, its recently announced consultation relates to visiting and not a legal right to a care supporter at all times. So would the Deputy Prime Minister speak to the Prime Minister about bringing forward legislation in the next King's Speech?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I think the honourable gentleman is right to highlight the need for care supporters to be able to have that kind of access, and I will take away the points that he has raised and raise them with my ministerial colleagues.
Colin Bradley.
If you're a carer of a loved one in this country, the rules are just absolutely ridiculous. You get about £75 a week, and that's supposed to be for you to live on. I mean, obviously, it's not enough, and you can't work. Like, it was one of the rules, you can't work if you want that that benefit. It's disgusting. And also, when I first came home to help look after my dad, I'd been living in Panama, and I applied for carer's allowance to help me look after my dad. And I was denied it because I'd spent too much time out of the country beforehand. I mean, the fact was I was earning money and it was going through my British bank account, and I was paying tax on it. Not much, but I was paying tax on it through the British system. But because I'd been out of the country, not even like, I still had my postal address in Liverpool. That didn't matter. They wanted they wanted to see my passport, and they added up the days in my passport before my application and said, no, you spent too many days out of the country. So what's happening is you got people who have been living in Germany or France or Spain, and because of Brexit, I mean, back in the day when it was all the EU, that was fine. But now we're not in the EU. They can hold that against you and saying, no, sorry, you're not going to get your £75 a week to look after your dying relative, because this government is just monstrous, and they just want to say no. The answer's no. Now, what's the question? But just one more thing that needs to be fixed once these absolute horrific, chundering gobshites are out of office.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know the value of interparliamentary relations, and in particular the Interparliamentary Union, which was founded nearly 135 years ago in this place. And we are very honoured this week to be joined by the President of the Interparliamentary Union, Mr. Duarte Pacheco. Would my right honourable friend join his campaign to get the USA to rejoin this very important international organisation?
Question.
Well, as my right honourable friend knows, the United Kingdom was a founding member of the Interparliamentary Union, and I would very much like the United States to rejoin, and I'm very happy to help make that case.
We're a Hobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not a day goes by without serious sexual harassment allegations in organisations up and down the country. My private member's bill on workplace protection from harassment could go a long way to address some of these serious issues, and indeed the bill has full government support. However, it is currently stuck in the other place. But a compromise is now in sight to amend the bill so that it can pass through the House of Lords. Our rules require that any amendment made in the House of Lords need to come back to the House of Commons. Will he ensure that a small amount of government time is made available in this place between now and the end of the parliamentary session to ensure that this important bill will become law?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, as the honourable lady knows, we have supported the bill. We are working on the bill, and my right honourable friend, the Equalities Minister, is very happy to meet with the honourable lady to discuss the measures further.
That completes Deputy Prime Minister's question. Just let the room clear. That
would really suck, wouldn't it? Imagine having to. Sorry, I've got to go and meet Kimmy Badenoch. I feel sorry for Vera Hobhouse there, who was one of the people who joined us in Three Blokes in the Pub, if you remember that from back in the day. Back in the day when we thought we could actually stop Brexit because it was a terrible, 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 terrible idea. And do you know what's funny? It's turned out to be a terrible, terrible idea. But we're not allowed to say I told you so because that's very patronising, apparently. And yeah, there's the Tories there, Torying, not answering any of the questions. The questions that the Tories have asked are all like softball questions, like, will you say well done for my constituency for existing for 100 years? Or whatever it was. I mean, it's just really? Say hello to my local soccer team, please. I like soccer. I don't know what it is, but I've heard about it. People seem to be very excited about it. I'm more interested in croquet myself. And that Tory, the one who was just like going on about the seagulls, it's just, this is Prime Minister. This is actually, they're running a country. Imagine this is a private company and we were, shareholders, stakeholders in the company. And we got to watch a meeting, at the managerial level where they were fielding questions and saying, okay, here's the answer to this question. And those were the answers that were given. You'd divest, wouldn't you? You'd be like, I'm out of here. Buy my shares. I don't want anything to do with this malfunctioning cacophony of insanity that is the British parliamentary political system that we've got at the moment, with the Tories in charge for 13 years, driving the country into the ground and talking about lifting people out of absolute poverty, which, as someone pointed out in the chat, is a euphemism for people who haven't got water or electricity. I don't think heating is actually on that list, or food. I don't think they include that on absolute poverty. So there you go. Badenoch got called out by a Tory peer committee members, funnily enough, you can still see the visible divide. They all seem defeated and deflect with misdirection to most questions and accountability. They all just seem bored now. I mean, it's just like, it's over. They know it's over, and it's just dragging on like the last season of Babylon 5 without any kind of effective resolution. It's just a pointless exercise at the moment. We need a general election. If the Tories had the country's best interests at heart, they would declare an election, but they're not going to, obviously. Jabroni says, I'm just imagining Dowden getting dive bombed by seagulls trying to get them off telephone wires in Norfolk. SNP should know better that Tories and gingers don't have souls, and I'm ginger. Says, I'm ginger as well. It's great. I sold my soul to Satan for the gift of rock and roll. Joke's on him. I'm ginger. I have no soul. Take that, Satan, you beast. I like Babylon 5, said David Dag. Yeah, but after episode 6 of it, season 4, it just went a bit crap because the defeat the Shadows and the Vorlons. Spoilers. They said, will you go away? And they went, okay. It all built up for ages. It's going to be this massive battle, include the whole galaxy is going to be fighting, and it's going to be 2 sides. And it's going to go on for, at least a season of just war. No, just it's a bit like the end of episode 2 of Star Wars, where you had begun the Clone Wars has, and then it starts the episode 3. You go, ended the Clone War has, and you're like, what? We didn't see the war. When was the war? What was that? Anyway, the Tories have indeed jumped the shark. They have indeed. David's at B5, Babylon 5. Babylon 5, a TV show in the 1990s, written by Michael Straczynski. J. Michael Straczynski. I can't remember his name now. He was a big comic book writer. He got to make a TV show. It's very good. Anyway, general election prediction, Graham. Before I go, okay. I predict a riot. But only if a man is killed by the police, not a woman, obviously, because we're sexist, horrible, misogynistic pigs in the world. I predict that the Tories will be absolutely decimated in the next election. I hope. I don't want to jinx it, but it's looking that way by the polls. The polls are showing that Labour are consistently 25 points ahead in the polls. That's enough for a devastating landslide election for Labour, devastating for the Tories, who might, according to some polls, be down to double digits in terms of their number of MPs. I can't really see that. I think they might go down to maybe 1997 levels of having about 150 odd MPs left after the purge, the great purge of 2024, which we know is on the cards. I think the Lib Dems will do quite well. I hope that Labour and Lib Dems have a non-aggression pact, something that I learned yesterday, which I didn't really know, is that if Labour and Lib Dems sort of teamed up to, formally to run their campaigns, as not against each other and standing down candidates and all that kind of stuff, there's a chance that the Electoral Commission could say, well, you're operating as one party. So you imagine that the Conservatives are actually 2 parties. They're the Conservative and Unionist Party, and Labour are also 2 parties. They are Labour and Cooperative parties. There's a Cooperative Party in the 1920s, and they joined with Labour. So there's an amount that you're allowed to spend in any election cycle, and it's a year before the election. So we could be in this situation now. So Labour have got to be really careful about money that they spend, because we don't know when the election's going to be, because they backheeled the Fixed Term Parliament Act. So it could be at any time the government decide to have it, which isn't great. And when people are talking about PR and the fact that we should be bringing PR and how bad is Starmer for not bringing in PR, we'll just like to point out there's nothing about bringing in PR in the Corbyn manifestos. In fact, they said that they were going to get rid of the Fixed Term Parliament Act as well, because it's not in their interest to allow the opposition parties to say, hey, how about we have an election? Anyway, interesting little fact there. But yeah, so say there's like 19 million that you're allowed to spend on your campaign. If you team up with another party, that means that those 2 parties together can only spend 19 million. So it basically halves the budget that they can spend on their respective campaigns. And that's why the Lib Dems and Labour and the Greens are never going to work together on an election, unfortunately. It's just the way it's set up. But also it means that if Reclaim and Reform UK, if they team up in the next election, then they'll have a set amount that they're allowed to spend together. And yeah, that's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons. Anyway, it's maybe interesting. But there you go. That's why Labour doing that. Sorry to bore you with the ins and outs of the election bollocks, but I think the Lib Dems are going to do quite well. I don't think the SNP are going to do as well as they have done in the past, just because all of the stuff with Sturgeon is going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths, and also some of the big things that they had to run on in the past are not exactly turning out like they wanted them to. People haven't got their second referendum to, vote out of the UK and therefore back into the EU. And I think a lot of people in Scotland who I've spoken to, and I know there's lots of people probably watching this who are big SNP supporters, and that's fine. I quite like the SNP, generally speaking. I quite like the Greens and the Lib Dems and Labour. I'm not massively tribal. I don't decide that everyone who's in a different party is the enemy, because I don't feel that way. The Tories are the enemy. Reclaim, Refouk, they're the parties that are the enemy, but not people on our side. I want us all to work together within the constraints of the system that we've got. But I could see I don't know if the Greens are going to get any more seats. They might get a seat in Bristol maybe, but until we have PR, we're not going to see a situation where the Greens get the representation that they deserve, because we have a system in which you only need 30,000 votes to get a Tory seat, Tory MP, but you need about 800,000 votes to get a single Green MP. And also Labour MPs, you need a lot more votes to get a Labour MP than you do for a Tory MP, because of the way that our political system is weighted towards having the Conservatives in government more often than not. And that's why for the last 100 years, 2/3 of the time has been with a Tory government and only 1/3 has been with a Labour government. The lack of PR is not serving us well. So, but that's another story. I think that they're going to have to really think about their manifesto. I mentioned this morning at Morning Brew that you should check out a tweet by Edwin Hayward, the writer of Slaying Brexit Unicorns, which is a really good book about what would happen if we Brexited, and it was completely on the money. And he's talking about what Labour should do now before the election. And one of the things is stop giving red lines about the single market, the customs union. Just say you're going to do what's in the best interest of the British people, because otherwise they'll be accused of U-turning. So just don't allow that accusation, because in the next 5 years there is going to be a point where we're going to have to say, listen, we're really going to have to go back into the single market. And if Labour call maybe an early election in 2027 or 2028 on that, they could do, without people screaming that it's a U-turn, because it's like, well, we said we were going to do what's in the best interest of the British people, and this is what's in the best interest of the British people. I will put a link to that in the description below after the broadcast, and also I'll put a link to the Teespring site where you can buy one of these Labour social mugs if you would like one of them. Right. Anyway, Graham, tell me something in Spanish. Buenos dias, amigo. Any good? No? Disculpe. What are Labour doing to attract young voters? Tuition fees, housing, scrapping anti-protest bill. That is my concern. We're going to get into this, because I have, not right now, but one of my friends, Davey Moo, he's very, very vocally, he's very vocal about his dislike of Starmer and what Labour are doing. And I would like to sit him down with Phil Morehouse and them to bash it out and have a conversation. I'll just sit there, just sort of listening along somewhere in the middle. And Phil can explain very well, as he does, why things are the way they are with Labour at the moment, and some things that they could possibly do better, and see if we can get some middle ground between someone who's very, very disenchanted with Starmer and someone like Phil who seems to understand what Starmer's doing and what Labour are doing. But there are a number of concerns, and I hope they are addressed by Labour before this next election. I'm not expecting them to put PR in the manifesto. I'm not expecting them UBI in the manifesto. Well, the last manifesto did say they would do a pilot scheme for UBI, so maybe that'll be in there. I don't know. And I'm not expecting a rejoin of the EU in the manifesto, but I am expecting them to dial back on these red lines when it comes to the EU, because don't say you're not going to do something. Just don't say what you're going to do. That's it. Just say, well, we're not going to rejoin the EU. They're not in the next parliament. We can't. It's too quick. But they could just say, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Either way, they're going to get crucified by the right-wing press in this country. So let's get Labour in. Let's get Leveson 2 inquiry, and basically get the get an independent body to be marking the homework of the tabloids, because at the moment the tabloids mark their own homework and decide what is appropriate and what isn't, which isn't the best way of doing things. Just ask that guy who used to present the news on BBC telly, maybe mentioning their names. Okay, right. Thank you very much for watching. I don't know if we've got any super chats this week, but generally thanks for the super chats. Phil Morehouse will be back in the morning at 9:30 for another morning brew. And until then, I'll say thank you so much for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.